There's a moment in every conversation where people decide who you are. They may not realize it. You may not realize it. But it happens in the span of a breath, a single sentence, a small shift in how you hold your voice. And in that moment, something inside them either opens or closes. They either lean in or they pull away. They either see you as someone to follow or someone to forget. Speaking like a leader isn't about authority or dominance or having the loudest voice in the room. It's about presence. That invisible energy that makes people feel safe, inspired, or compelled to listen. It's not a talent you're born with. It's a craft you build, one habit at a time. And the moment you change how you communicate, you change the way the world responds to you. Most people underestimate this. They think leadership is technical, logical, mechanical. But human beings don't follow instructions. They follow emotions. We follow clarity. We follow confidence. We follow people who make us feel something, even if we don't have the words for it. And that's why communication is the real language of leadership. Not strategy, not brilliance, not credentials. Communication, the bridge between who you are and who people become when they listen to you. So today, we're stepping into that world. Not the world of tricks or gimmicks or memorized lines, but the deeper world of presence. You'll discover 5 communication habits, simple human habits, that instantly shift how people experience you. These aren't theatrical techniques. They're the behaviors of leaders whose voices stay with you long after the conversation ends. But first, let's slow down. Because speaking like a leader doesn't begin with talking. It begins with noticing. Noticing the pace of the room. Noticing the weight of silence. Noticing your own breath before words ever leave your mouth. Most people rush into speech as if the first one to talk wins. Leaders don't do that. Leaders enter the space with awareness. They take a beat, a quiet second. And in doing so, they reset the energy of everyone around them. It's subtle, but it's powerful. And once you master that first habit of presence, every word that follows carries more meaning. You've probably met someone like this before. Someone who walks into a meeting and doesn't have to announce themselves. They don't need to talk over anyone. They don't need to compete for space. And yet, people turn toward them. Their energy changes. They speak, even softly, and suddenly the room recalibrates. Not because of volume, but because of certainty. Because their mind is anchored. Their emotions are steady. Their words are chosen, not spilled. That's the foundation of leadership communication, intentionality. Speaking not to fill silence, but to shape it. Speaking not to impress, but to impact. Speaking with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their voice matters. Not more than others, but equally, firmly, unquestionably. And here's the truth. You don't get presence from practicing lines in the mirror. You get presence from something much deeper. You get it from alignment. When your voice, your body, and your intention are all moving in the same direction. When you say what you mean what you say, and speak it in a way that resonates with people beyond the words. Think of leaders you admire, not the ones with titles, the ones with gravity. People who can say a single sentence and shift the entire emotional temperature of a room. They all share something in common. They're not trying to sound like someone else. They speak from a grounded version of themselves. And people trust them because what they say feels true. Not rehearsed, not manipulated, but lived. You're going to learn how to do that, not by copying them, but by unlocking the version of you that can lead without forcing it. The version of you people naturally lean toward. The version of you who speaks with clarity, confidence, and emotional intelligence. Even in the moments where your heart is beating a little too fast. Because let's be honest, leadership moments rarely happen when you feel comfortable. They happen in the tension, the high-stakes conversation, the disagreement, the unexpected question, the moment when your brain wants to retreat, and you have to decide whether your voice will rise or shrink. Speaking like a leader is the ability to stay centered through those moments, to keep your tone steady, to keep your message simple, to keep your presence strong. And that begins with understanding how people listen. Most people don't listen to your words. They listen to your state. They listen to your energy. They listen to the pauses, the breaths, the tone between the lines. You could say the smartest sentence in the world, But if your voice wavers, your words lose their weight. On the other hand, you could say something incredibly simple, one clean phrase. And if it's delivered with grounded clarity, people feel it in their chest. This is why leaders obsess over communication. Not because they want to manipulate, but because they understand influence lives in the subtle things. The micro behaviors, the emotional cues, the way you look at someone before you speak, the way you articulate a point and let it breathe, the way you navigate disagreement without tension leaking into your voice. These are the things that separate ordinary speakers from leaders who can motivate, guide, and transform the people around them. As we go through each of the 5 communication habits, I want you to reflect on something. Leadership isn't about becoming a different person. It's about subtracting the noise, the insecurity, the over-explaining, the filler, the fear, until only your clearest voice remains. You're not becoming someone new. You're revealing someone who was there all along, someone capable, someone persuasive, someone people naturally trust. And as we move into the first core principle, I want you to imagine a version of you who walks into a conversation with calm intention. Someone whose presence shifts the atmosphere before they even speak. Someone who communicates with purpose, not panic. That version of you exists. And by the time we finish this journey, you'll know how to show up as that person more consistently. Because speaking like a leader isn't about performing. It's about being fully, authentically, powerfully yourself. In a world that rarely slows down long enough to let you realize how much your voice can matter. The first habit that transforms your presence is the habit of deliberate pace. Not slowness, pace. The intentional rhythm of your speech. Most people speak the way they think. Quickly, reactively, emotionally tangled. But leaders speak with the pace of someone who is in control of their mind. Someone who doesn't rush to prove, doesn't scramble to be heard, and doesn't fear the silence between sentences. Silence to most people feels like a threat. They worry that if they pause, they'll lose attention. But leaders understand the opposite. Silence is attention. A well-placed pause creates anticipation. It signals certainty. It tells people you're choosing your words, not spilling them. And in that tiny pocket of stillness, something powerful happens. They lean in. This doesn't mean dragging your voice or stretching every sentence into a dramatic moment. It means allowing your thoughts to land, letting your message breathe, giving the listener time to absorb your meaning instead of forcing them to chase it. When you stop racing your words, your intelligence finally has space to be heard. And the moment your voice becomes intentional, your presence becomes magnetic. Think of someone you've met who spoke just a bit too fast. Their ideas might have been good. They might have been passionate. But something about the speed made their confidence feel fragile, their message feel rushed, their reliability feel uncertain. Rapid speech suggests urgency, and urgency, in communication, often feels like insecurity dressed as enthusiasm. Now, imagine someone who speaks with a steady, grounded rhythm. They don't rush. They don't drag. They speak as if they trust their own voice to carry the moment. When they pause, the silence isn't empty. It feels filled with thought, with intention, with presence. That rhythm alone makes people view them as composed, competent, and authoritative. This is why deliberate pace is so effective. It signals emotional regulation. Humans are wired to follow those who appear emotionally steady. When your voice moves with calm rhythm, people unconsciously feel safer. They feel guided, not overwhelmed. They feel like you're navigating the moment with them, not pushing them through it. That is leadership. That is presence. But pace isn't just about slowing down. It's about syncing your speech with your thinking. If your mouth moves faster than your mind, your authenticity gets lost. But when your words follow your thoughts, cleanly, consciously, deliberately, everything about you feels more grounded. And grounding is the essence of presence. Let's try something simple in concept, but transformative in practice. Imagine saying something important with just a bit more space, a fraction of a breath, a slight pause before the key idea, a moment where your voice rests, letting gravity form behind your words. That micro-adjustment alone can change the entire impact of what you say. Real leaders master this instinctively. They know when to slow, when to let a message land, when to let silence emphasize what their voice doesn't need to. They also know when to increase pace, when energy, enthusiasm, or momentum requires it. Leadership communication is not a single speed. It's a dynamic expression, a dance between clarity and emotion. But the core of that dance is control. When you own your pace, you control the energy of the room. And when you control the energy, you don't need to fight for influence. Influence arrives naturally. The second habit that shifts your presence is the habit of speaking in clean, structured ideas. Most people talk in tangled threads. They start a sentence, jump to another thought, return to the first, lose their point, add unnecessary context, then try to rescue the idea at the end. And while they're doing that, the listener is silently trying to decode meaning from scattered fragments. Leaders speak differently. They communicate in shapes, clear, simple shapes. A beginning, a middle, an end. A point, an explanation, a conclusion. They don't overwhelm with information. They don't stack 5 ideas into one sentence. They choose the thought, commit to it, deliver it cleanly, and let it land. This is why, when leaders speak, people often describe their words as clear or powerful or easy to understand. It's not because the ideas are simple. It's because the structure is simple. The mind doesn't have to work to find the meaning. The meaning is already clear. Imagine hearing someone say, "So basically what I'm trying to say is that, when we look at the situation," and I guess there's a lot of different factors. But ultimately what I'm thinking is maybe we should shift our approach a little bit, because the way we're doing it now might not be, it's not wrong, but it's kind of not effective. Now imagine someone else saying, "We need a better approach. Here's why." 2 different worlds, 2 different levels of presence. Clean structure doesn't mean being blunt or harsh. It means respecting your listener's cognitive load. It means giving their brain a path, a straight, walkable path, instead of a maze. And when your message is clear, your presence feels strong. Because clarity is strength. Confusion is weakness. When you speak in structured ideas, people trust you. They may not agree with you. They may challenge you. They may ask for more detail. But they will trust the clarity of your thinking. They will trust that you've processed your ideas before presenting them. And that trust is the foundation of followership. There's a subtle psychological effect at play here. People assume your communication style mirrors your decision-making style. If your speech is scattered, they assume your thinking is scattered. If your speech is clear, they assume your judgment is clear. Leaders win trust through clarity long before competence can be proven. So how do you build this habit? You simplify the shape of your thoughts. Instead of trying to sound impressive, you aim to sound unmistakable. Instead of stacking thoughts, you layer them. Instead of rambling, you choose. And the moment you choose a clean structure, your presence changes. Your voice carries more weight. Your message feels intentional. Your listener feels guided. Because leadership isn't about saying more. It's about saying what matters, in a way that people can carry with them long after the conversation ends. There's another habit leaders rely on, one that's rarely discussed, but felt instantly. It's the habit of emotional neutrality. Not emotional suppression, not emotional distance, but emotional neutrality. The ability to keep your voice steady even when the moment isn't. The ability to stay grounded when others react. The ability to hold your posture, your breath, and your tone in a way that signals, without words, that you are centered. This is one of the most subtle forms of influence. Most people let their emotions leak into their speech. Their irritation sharpens their tone. Their anxiety speeds their words. Their insecurity makes their voice smaller. Their frustration makes their sentences shorter. They don't realize their delivery is revealing everything they're trying to hide. Leaders understand that presence is felt more than spoken. Your voice is a mirror. It reveals your state before it reveals your message. When you can hold emotional neutrality, your voice becomes a stabilizing force in the room. People subconsciously see you as the emotional anchor. Someone who won't react impulsively. Someone who won't escalate the heat. Someone who can guide the moment rather than be consumed by it. Think back to a time when someone around you was panicking, and one calm voice cut through the chaos. That voice didn't need to be loud or forceful. It simply needed to be steady. And the moment you heard it, you felt yourself regulate. That's the impact of emotional neutrality. It creates safety. And people follow what makes them feel safe. But neutrality isn't about ignoring emotions. It's about choosing which emotion you bring into the conversation. It's about understanding that your delivery sets the temperature, and the temperature determines the outcome. A leader's tone is a thermostat. They don't check the room's emotional climate, they set it. When you speak with controlled emotion, people don't just hear your words. They feel your stability. They sense discipline in your voice. They sense calm. They sense intention. And that steady presence shifts everything. The pace of conversation, the depth of discussion, the willingness of others to listen or cooperate. This doesn't mean you never show passion or excitement. In fact, passion becomes far more impactful when it's intentional, not accidental. When your baseline is calm, your highs are inspiring. When your baseline is chaotic, your highs overwhelm people. Passion without discipline feels like noise. Passion with discipline feels like leadership. So neutrality is not the absence of emotion. It's mastery over it. It's the ability to feel something internally, stress, frustration, urgency, but not let it hijack your delivery. It's the inner voice that says, we stay steady here, we stay clear, we stay grounded. Leaders use this habit in crucial moments, during disagreements, during conflict, during unexpected challenges, during emotionally charged conversations, during times when everyone else is losing clarity. Because when you stay neutral, you keep the entire room from spiraling. Your calm becomes contagious. Your presence becomes the anchor. And people instinctively trust the person who can hold stillness while others shake. Now, let's move into the next habit. One of the most powerful and one of the most underestimated. The habit of concise certainty. Leaders don't bury their message under layers of justification. They don't over-explain. They don't dilute their power by apologizing for having a point. They speak with concise certainty, not dominance, not arrogance, but clarity with a backbone. Most people over-explain because they fear being misunderstood. They add unnecessary context, excuses, disclaimers, softeners, and justification to make their message safe. But every extra layer weakens the core of the message. The more you explain, the less confident you sound. The less confident you sound, the less seriously people take your words. Leaders communicate differently. They state their point cleanly, directly, and without apology. Then they pause. They let the message land. They allow space for questions or discussion. They don't rush to fill the silence in case someone disagrees. They trust their clarity, and that trust creates trust. Concise certainty sounds like this. I disagree. Here's what I think we should consider. I don't think this is the right direction. This is what I recommend. This is what I need from you. Simple, clear, honest, strong, not harsh, not aggressive, just centered and unapologetically direct. People follow communicators who sound like they know where they stand. You don't need to be right all the time. You simply need to speak like someone who is willing to take responsibility for their perspective. The irony is this. When you stop over-explaining, people start respecting your voice far more. They also listen more carefully. Because you're no longer drowning your message in unnecessary noise. You're trusting them enough to speak in clean lines. Concise certainty also signals something deeper, boundaries. When you communicate with clarity and brevity, you show that you value your time and theirs. You show that you're willing to stand behind your ideas. You show that you're not afraid of disagreement. And people instinctively respect someone who holds that kind of internal solidity. But there's a nuance here. Concise certainty works only when you're grounded. If you say something direct, but your tone carries anxiety or hidden aggression, the message feels off. It feels mismatched. People sense that you're forcing the confidence instead of embodying it. Confidence isn't loud. Confidence isn't fast. Confidence isn't complicated. Confidence is direct. Confident speakers make the complex sound simple. And the moment you shift from scattered language to concise certainty, people feel the difference instantly. You become easier to follow, easier to understand, easier to believe. Because clarity is credibility. And leaders speak with clarity not to be right, but to be understood. There's a kind of listening that leaders practice. A listening so focused, so present, that it transforms the way others speak to them. Most people listen only enough to respond. They hear words, but not meaning. They hear tone, but not emotion. They hear content, but not context. And because of that, their communication becomes a game of mental ping pong. Fast, reactive, and shallow. But leaders listen differently. They listen as if the other person's words contain a map of fears, motivations, beliefs, and needs. They listen not just for what is said, but for what is unsaid. For the breath before the sentence, for the hesitation, for the change in rhythm, for the moment when someone drifts away from their point, revealing what they care about most. Deep listening is not passive. It's active. It's engaged. It's quiet but powerful. And the moment people feel they are truly heard, their energy shifts. They soften. They open. They trust. Because being understood is one of the rarest experiences we get in conversation. Too rare, too precious, too impactful. Leaders understand that listening is not the absence of speaking. It is the foundation of influence. When you listen deeply, you gain more clarity than speaking could ever give you. You understand people's real motivations. You uncover the real problem beneath the surface. You see what direction the moment needs. And when you finally speak, your words are sharper, simpler, and far more effective. And there's another truth. The quality of your listening becomes the quality of your decisions. People reveal everything when they feel safe, but they shut down when they feel rushed, judged, or unheard. The leader who listens well gathers better information. They build stronger relationships. They avoid unnecessary conflict. They pick up signals others miss, and they earn loyalty without asking for it. Because people follow those who make them feel understood. Deep listening also changes the way you speak. When you truly understand someone, when you hear the emotion behind the words, your response becomes more precise. You stop talking past people. You stop giving generic advice. You stop assuming their needs. Instead, you speak directly into the heart of what they're actually trying to say. That's what makes certain leaders feel wise or intuitive. It's not magic, it's listening. When you understand someone deeply, your words naturally become tailored, relevant, and powerful. And the person on the other side feels something they rarely feel in conversations: connection. There's a psychological shift that happens here. When someone feels listened to, their brain releases oxytocin, a chemical of bonding and trust. Their defenses lower. Their openness increases. Their willingness to follow or be influenced rises. Leaders don't manipulate this. They honor it. They understand that influence without trust is fragile. It breaks under pressure. But influence built on genuine connection can withstand conflict, challenge, and change. And deep listening doesn't only strengthen your connection with others, it also strengthens your connection with yourself. When you listen deeply to what people say and to what they don't, you start to hear your own instinct more clearly. You make decisions with more awareness. You communicate with more precision. You navigate conflict with more clarity. This is why the greatest communicators often speak less than everyone else. Not because they lack ideas, but because they understand the power of gathering information before sharing it. They speak after listening, not instead of listening. Their words become distilled, focused, and intentional. And when they do speak, people pay attention. They know that the words coming from someone who listens deeply carry weight. They carry insight. They carry empathy. They carry understanding. Let's go deeper. Because listening isn't just about hearing. It's about presence. And presence is a choice. Most people spend their conversations half present. One part listening, one part planning their reply. One part thinking, one part pretending. Their attention is split. Their presence is divided. And the person they're speaking with feels that division like a cold wind. They may not identify it consciously, but they feel it. They feel the disconnect. They feel the distance. A leader's presence is full, undivided. When you're speaking to someone who is fully with you, you feel it instantly. Their eyes stay steady. Their expression softens. Their energy aligns with yours. They're not rushing you. They're not scanning for exits. They're not mentally checking their next task. They're here, with you, in this moment. That kind of presence is magnetic. It makes people feel valued. It makes them feel respected. It makes them feel human. And in a world constantly demanding attention, someone who offers full presence becomes unforgettable. But deep listening is not just for calm moments. It is a tool for conflict. It is the bridge through disagreements. When two people disagree, most arguments escalate not because of the topic, but because neither person feels heard. They're not fighting over the idea. They're fighting over the lack of understanding. A leader breaks that cycle by listening first, by saying in their presence, "I'm here, I hear you. Let me understand your point fully." You don't have to agree. Agreement is not the goal. Understanding is. And when someone feels understood, even when you disagree with them, they become far more open to hearing your perspective. This habit, deep listening, is the quiet superpower behind persuasive communication, but it leads naturally into the next one. Because once you listen, once you understand, once you sense the emotional landscape of the moment, the next thing a leader masters is something just as important. The habit of speaking with emotional resonance. Not emotional intensity, emotional resonance. The ability to make people feel what you mean, not just hear what you say. There's a moment in every powerful conversation when words stop being information and start becoming emotion. When someone doesn't just understand what you're saying, they feel it. That shift doesn't happen by accident. It happens because the speaker has learned how to create emotional resonance. Leaders speak in a way that touches something deeper than logic. They communicate in a way that vibrates through a person's internal world. Their hopes, their fears, their aspirations, their sense of meaning. They understand that human beings don't remember sentences. They remember emotions. They remember the way someone made them feel. And leadership is about shaping that feeling in a way that elevates, strengthens, and inspires. But emotional resonance doesn't come from dramatic language or motivational theatrics. It comes from sincerity, from alignment, from speaking with a tone that matches the truth of your message. People can always sense when emotion is forced. They can sense when a speaker is trying to sound powerful instead of speaking from power. True resonance requires grounding. It requires presence. It requires speaking not from performance, but from authenticity. Leaders do something subtle when they communicate. They connect the idea they're sharing to a human truth. They speak to the person's inner world, not just their outer behavior. They don't say, "Here's what you need to do." They say, "Here's why this matters. Here's what it unlocks. Here's what it means for you. Here's what it feels like when you step into this." They don't just inform, they awaken. There is a rhythm to resonant communication, a softness in some moments, a firmness in others, a quiet reflection followed by a sentence that carries weight. Leaders shift tone intentionally, guiding the emotional journey of the listener. They know when to lean in with intensity and when to pull back with gentleness. They understand that presence isn't flat, it's layered, textured, alive. Think of a time when someone spoke to you and something inside you changed. Maybe it was a mentor, a teacher, a friend, or a leader you respected. They didn't just give you advice. They gave you clarity. They made you feel seen, capable, understood. Their words landed because their voice carried the depth of their intention. That is resonance. When you speak with emotional resonance, your voice becomes a bridge, connecting your inner conviction with someone else's inner truth. You're not trying to push them. You're guiding them. You're offering meaning, not pressure. And people respond deeply to meaning. But resonance is impossible without vulnerability. Not weakness, vulnerability. The willingness to speak from a place of honesty instead of armor. Leaders don't hide behind intellectual language. They don't pretend to be invincible. They speak openly about challenges, doubts, lessons learned, and the human realities behind the ideas. Because authenticity is magnetic, and people follow those who are real. Emotional resonance also means knowing when to slow your voice so the listener can feel the weight of a moment. Sometimes a single sentence delivered with honest stillness can create more impact than 10 paragraphs delivered with force. A leader's voice doesn't just speak. It breathes. It carries warmth. It carries intention. It carries depth. And there's something even more important. The resonance must match the message. If you're sharing something meaningful, your tone should reflect that meaning. If you're offering perspective, your tone should carry curiosity. If you're giving encouragement, your tone should feel steady, supportive, trustworthy. Misaligned tone is one of the quickest ways to lose credibility. But aligned tone creates instant influence. Here's the deeper truth. People don't follow the words. They follow the state of the speaker. And emotional resonance is the art of communicating from a centered state, where your tone, your message, and your intention move in harmony. When those three elements align, your presence becomes unforgettable. There's a reason people say, "It's not what you said, it's how you said it." They're talking about resonance. They're talking about the moment when your voice carries something beyond sound, something that nudges a person's internal compass, something that makes them pause, breathe, rethink, or step forward with renewed courage. This is why the best leaders often leave people speechless. Not because their words were complicated, but because their words carried truth. They spoke in a way that reached the emotional layer beneath logic. And at that layer, transformation begins. But emotional resonance isn't the final piece. There is another habit, one that amplifies all the others. And it is one of the most powerful tools leaders have. The habit of intentional brevity, not shortness, not harsh minimalism, intentional brevity. The discipline of saying less so that your message means more. When a leader speaks, there is no wasted breath, no decorative fluff, no unnecessary detours. Their words carry weight because they don't bury meaning under excess. They cut through the noise with simplicity, which is why their voice lingers in people's minds long after the conversation ends. Intentional brevity is not about fewer words. It's about higher density. Every sentence carries meaning. Every phrase has purpose. Every moment of silence is deliberate. This habit is what makes a message memorable, because the human mind doesn't hold on to long explanations. It holds on to clean, resonant, purposeful lines. A clear sentence can become a compass for someone's entire life. A powerful phrase can echo in someone's mind for years. Leaders choose their words with that level of intention. But brevity is not just about impact. It's also about respect. Respect for the listener's time, attention, and bandwidth. In a world full of noise, the speaker who chooses clarity earns trust. The speaker who can express a complex idea simply earns admiration. And the speaker who uses fewer words to say more becomes the one people remember. When you combine deep listening, emotional resonance, and intentional brevity, you reach a level of communication that feels effortless, natural, magnetic. It's the kind of communication that creates leaders, not because of authority, but because people feel guided. There's a moment in every powerful conversation when words stop being information and start becoming emotion. When someone doesn't just understand what you're saying, they feel it. That shift doesn't happen by accident. It happens because the speaker has learned how to create emotional resonance. Leaders speak in a way that touches something deeper than logic. They communicate in a way that vibrates through a person's internal world. Their hopes, their fears, their aspirations, their sense of meaning. They understand that human beings don't remember sentences. They remember emotions. They remember the way someone made them feel. And leadership is about shaping that feeling in a way that elevates, strengthens, and inspires. But emotional resonance doesn't come from dramatic language or motivational theatrics. It comes from sincerity, from alignment, from speaking with a tone that matches the truth of your message. People can always sense when emotion is forced. They can sense when a speaker is trying to sound powerful instead of speaking from power. True resonance requires grounding. It requires presence. It requires speaking not from performance, but from authenticity. Leaders do something subtle when they communicate. They connect the idea they're sharing to a human truth. They speak to the person's inner world, not just their outer behavior. They don't say, "Here's what you need to do." They say, "Here's why this matters. Here's what it unlocks. Here's what it means for you. Here's what it feels like when you step into this." They don't just inform, they awaken. There is a rhythm to resonant communication, a softness in some moments, a firmness in others. a quiet reflection followed by a sentence that carries weight. Leaders shift tone intentionally, guiding the emotional journey of the listener. They know when to lean in with intensity and when to pull back with gentleness. They understand that presence isn't flat, it's layered, textured, alive. Think of a time when someone spoke to you and something inside you changed. Maybe it was a mentor, a teacher, a friend, or a leader you respected. They didn't just give you advice. They gave you clarity. They made you feel seen, capable, understood. Their words landed because their voice carried the depth of their intention. That is resonance. When you speak with emotional resonance, your voice becomes a bridge, connecting your inner conviction with someone else's inner truth. You're not trying to push them. You're guiding them. You're offering meaning, not pressure. And people respond deeply to meaning. But resonance is impossible without vulnerability. Not weakness, vulnerability. The willingness to speak from a place of honesty instead of armor. Leaders don't hide behind intellectual language. They don't pretend to be invincible. They speak openly about challenges, doubts, lessons learned, and the human realities behind the ideas. Because authenticity is magnetic, and people follow those who are real. Emotional resonance also means knowing when to slow your voice so the listener can feel the weight of a moment. Sometimes a single sentence delivered with honest stillness can create more impact than 10 paragraphs delivered with force. A leader's voice doesn't just speak. It breathes. It carries warmth. It carries intention. It carries depth. And there's something even more important. The resonance must match the message. If you're sharing something meaningful, your tone should reflect that meaning. If you're offering perspective, your tone should carry curiosity. If you're giving encouragement, your tone should feel steady, supportive, trustworthy. Misaligned tone is one of the quickest ways to lose credibility. But aligned tone creates instant influence. Here's the deeper truth. People don't follow the words. They follow the state of the speaker. And emotional resonance is the art of communicating from a centered state, where your tone, your message, and your intention move in harmony. When those three elements align, your presence becomes unforgettable. There's a reason people say, "It's not what you said, it's how you said it." They're talking about resonance. They're talking about the moment when your voice carries something beyond sound, something that nudges a person's internal compass, something that makes them pause, breathe, rethink, or step forward with renewed courage. This is why the best leaders often leave people speechless. Not because their words were complicated, but because their words carried truth. They spoke in a way that reached the emotional layer beneath logic. And at that layer, transformation begins. But emotional resonance isn't the final piece. There is another habit, one that amplifies all the others. And it is one of the most powerful tools leaders have. The habit of intentional brevity, not shortness, not harsh minimalism. Intentional brevity, the discipline of saying less so that your message means more. When a leader speaks, there is no wasted breath, no decorative fluff, no unnecessary detours. Their words carry weight because they don't bury meaning under excess. They cut through the noise with simplicity, which is why their voice lingers in people's minds long after the conversation ends. Intentional brevity is not about fewer words. It's about higher density. Every sentence carries meaning. Every phrase has purpose. Every moment of silence is deliberate. This habit is what makes a message memorable, because the human mind doesn't hold on to long explanations. It holds on to clean, resonant, purposeful lines. A clear sentence can become a compass for someone's entire life. A powerful phrase can echo in someone's mind for years. Leaders choose their words with that level of intention. But brevity is not just about impact, it's also about respect. Respect for the listener's time, attention, and bandwidth. In a world full of noise, the speaker who chooses clarity earns trust. The speaker who can express a complex idea simply earns admiration. And the speaker who uses fewer words to say more becomes the one people remember. When you combine deep listening, emotional resonance, and intentional brevity, you reach a level of communication that feels effortless, natural, magnetic. It's the kind of communication that creates leaders, not because of authority, but because people feel guided. And all of these habits lead us to the final one, the one that transforms not just how you speak, but how others experience you. The habit of calibrated presence, the ability to shift your energy, your tone, your pace, and your delivery based on the needs of the moment. Not rigid, not scripted, but adaptive, aware, and deeply attuned to the room. There is a moment in every conversation where the energy shifts. Sometimes it rises, sometimes it falls, sometimes it tightens, sometimes it opens. Most people don't notice it. They just continue speaking from momentum, dragging the conversation along the same emotional track. But leaders feel these shifts. They sense them in the air. They adjust real time with intuition and intention. This is the final habit, the habit of calibrated presence, the ability to shape your communication based on the emotional landscape of the moment. Presence that adapts instead of executes. Presence that responds instead of reacts. Presence that meets people where they are and guides them toward where they need to be. Calibrated presence is why some leaders can walk into a chaotic room and bring calm, and walk into a silent room and bring energy. It's why they can speak gently to someone who is overwhelmed and firmly to someone who needs clarity. It's why they know when to speak boldly and when to speak softly, when to challenge and when to encourage, when to hold space and when to take the lead. This is the art behind leadership communication, the art of emotional intelligence expressed through your voice. Calibrated presence begins with awareness, the ability to read the room without letting the room control you, the ability to sense tension without absorbing it, the ability to pick up emotional cues, the posture, the breathing, the tone, the pace, and adjust your own presence in a way that brings balance. If someone is anxious and you meet them with anxious energy, the tension rises. If someone is defensive and you meet them with defensiveness, the conflict escalates. If someone is overwhelmed and you meet them with pressure, they shut down. But if someone is anxious and you meet them with steady calm, if someone is defensive and you meet them with grounded clarity, if someone is overwhelmed and you meet them with quiet reassurance, everything changes. Leadership is not about matching energy. It's about elevating it. Calibrated presence means you regulate yourself first. You check your breath. You ground your voice. You return to your center before you speak. You become the steady point in the emotional turbulence of the moment. And from that inner stability, you choose the right tone, not the automatic one, not the habitual one, but the intentional one. This requires self-awareness, the ability to notice your own impulses. Maybe your instinct is to argue. Maybe your instinct is to fill the silence. Maybe your instinct is to rush to conclusions. But leaders override instinct with intention. They pause long enough to choose the version of themselves they want to bring into the moment. That choice is presence. And presence changes everything. There is something magnetic about a person who can calibrate themselves. You can feel it. They never seem thrown off. They never seem reactive. They never seem emotionally hijacked by the moment. Even when things get uncomfortable, there is a steadiness to them. A quiet confidence that says, "We'll navigate this." People lean toward that kind of presence instinctively. Humans gravitate toward stability. Leaders aren't stable because they're unemotional. They're stable because their emotions don't run the conversation. Calibrated presence also means adjusting your language. Sometimes the moment calls for clarity, short, direct sentences. Sometimes it calls for empathy, softer, slower phrasing. Sometimes it calls for vision, expressive, inspiring language. A leader senses what the moment needs and shifts their words accordingly. They're not performing, they're attuning. Attunement is what creates connection. This is why some leaders can have a difficult conversation without making it destructive. They can discuss uncomfortable truths without triggering defensiveness. They can share bold ideas without overwhelming the room. They know how to bring just the right energy, firm enough to be taken seriously, soft enough to be received, clear enough to be understood. Calibrated presence is also the habit that makes leaders incredible under pressure. When stress hits, most people tighten. Their voice rises, their sentences shorten, their breathing quickens, their tone sharpens. They start speaking from a place of survival, not intention. But leaders who master this habit do the opposite. They expand. They breathe deeper. They slow their pace just slightly. They speak from clarity, not urgency. Their presence becomes larger than the moment. And because of that, the moment feels less threatening. Pressure reveals who we are. Calibration reveals who we choose to be. And the beauty of this habit is that it evolves with practice. The more you observe emotional dynamics, the more intuitive your calibration becomes. You start to feel when someone needs reassurance before direction. You sense when someone needs to express themselves before hearing feedback. You recognize when a group needs inspiration and when they need clarity. This is why leadership communication is never one size fits all. It's adaptive, alive, human. Calibrated presence also extends to body language. The subtle adjustments that align with your voice. When the moment is tense, your posture opens instead of closes. When someone is emotional, your expression softens. When someone is uncertain, your eye contact steadies. Your physical presence becomes part of your message. And people feel that alignment, even if they can't describe it. Ultimately, calibrated presence is about intention over impulse. It's about choosing how you show up. Instead of letting the moment choose for you, it's about being emotionally intelligent enough to understand the room and emotionally disciplined enough to shape it. And when you combine all the habits we've explored, deliberate pace, structured clarity, emotional neutrality, concise certainty, deep listening, emotional resonance, and calibrated presence, something powerful begins to happen. Your communication stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like leadership. Your presence stops feeling accidental and starts feeling intentional. People start paying attention differently. They remember your words differently. They respond to you differently. They trust you differently because your voice no longer just communicates. It influences, it guides, it grounds, it inspires. And now, as we move toward the conclusion, everything comes together. The reflection, the integration, the shift within you that these habits are meant to create. There comes a moment, after learning something new, when the mind quiets and the truth begins to settle. A moment when you stop thinking about techniques or strategies or steps, and you start feeling the shift inside you. Not a dramatic transformation, not a sudden burst of confidence, but a quiet knowing, a realization that leadership, at its core, is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more intentional with who you already are. These habits, these 5 ways of communicating, they're not decorations. They're not tricks. They're not performances. They're expressions of presence, expressions of clarity, expressions of a calmer, more thoughtful, more grounded version of you. And maybe, as you've listened, there were moments where you recognized patterns in yourself. Maybe you saw the moments when you rush your words, or over-explain, or tighten your voice under pressure. Maybe you realized how often you listen only to respond, instead of listening to understand. Or maybe you felt the quiet truth that your presence is capable of much more than you've allowed it to be. None of these realizations are judgments. They're invitations. Invitations to speak with more intention. Invitations to slow down the pace of your words so your mind can follow. Invitations to choose clarity over clutter, groundedness over reactivity, resonance over noise. Invitations to show up not as someone trying to prove themselves, but as someone ready to guide. Because the world doesn't need louder voices, it needs steadier ones. It needs leaders who can hold the moment with grace. Leaders who can speak with conviction without aggression. Leaders who can express emotion without losing their center. Leaders who can listen deeply enough to understand and speak clearly enough to be understood. Leadership is not the volume of your voice. It's the weight of your presence. It's the intention behind your words. It's the calm beneath your tone. It's the patience in your pauses. It's the sincerity that lives inside every sentence you choose to speak. And the truth is this: you don't become a leader the moment you get a title. You become a leader the moment your communication starts elevating the people around you. Maybe you already do this in small ways. Maybe you've done it without realizing. Maybe this entire time, the leader in you has simply been waiting for you to slow down long enough to hear your own voice. The real one, the grounded one, the one that doesn't need permission to speak with purpose. Let that voice rise. Let it grow. Let it become the one you bring into your conversations, your relationships, your work, your decisions, and your life. Because every conversation you enter is an opportunity to shift the energy of a room. Every moment of silence is a chance to choose clarity. Every disagreement is an invitation to remain grounded. Every word you speak can either add noise or create direction. Leadership lives in those choices. Presence grows in those choices. Influence is earned through those choices. And if there's one thing I hope you carry with you, it's this. You don't need to force leadership. You don't need to act like someone you've seen. You don't need to imitate the voices you admire. Speak from who you are. When you are fully present, fully aware, and fully intentional, that is the voice people trust. That is the voice people follow. That is the voice that leaves an imprint. And before we end, here's one soft truth to hold close. You don't have to change everything at once. Just change one moment at a time. One conversation, one pause, one breath before you speak, one choice to listen deeply, one sentence delivered with clarity instead of clutter, one moment where you let your presence lead before your words do. Do that today. Do it again tomorrow. And slowly, quietly, steadily, you will begin to speak like someone whose voice carries direction, calm, and purpose. Someone people look to. Someone people feel safe around. Someone people trust. Because the smartest communicators aren't the ones who speak the most. They're the ones who listen deeply, think clearly, and speak with purpose. And that leader, the one who speaks with presence, clarity, and resonance, is already within you. Now, it's just time to let that voice be heard.